Hello everybody and welcome to this EMCC Global GPS Dialogue. Really pleased that Jen Britton can be here for her third dialogue with us now, and super excited to hear about her topic today. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand you straight over to Jen.
All right, well, thank you, Nicola, and good morning wherever you are in the world. Today, I get the pleasure to bring us together to have some dialogue around group coaching. So today is an opportunity for us to dive into three core areas in today's evolving workspace. I picked engagement, connection, and belonging. And as you heard from Nicola, this is my third GPS. In 2020, I was here talking about virtual conversations based on my writing, Effective Virtual Conversations. Last year, I was back. We talked about supporting people in the remote and hybrid world. So a little around leadership, a little around teamwork. And that dove into my latest writing last year of Reconnecting Workspaces. But today goes full circle. If you have heard my name before, it's probably because you might have read me. So I wrote the world's first book on group coaching back in 2009. And I've had the pleasure in the last 12, 13 years to touch the work of thousands, tens of thousands of coaches. So we're really diving into an area that, while it is road-tested group coaching and like team coaching, which is a related sibling, is finding its feet in this moment. I won't call it a post-pandemic world by any means, but at our current evolving workspace. So our focus today, we're going to have the opportunity to come together to look at three different areas. We're going to be looking at more experiential approaches. And my own background was as an experiential educator more than 3 decades ago. So you might notice I am calling in from Canada. I am Canadian. I'm calling in from about an hour north of Toronto, Canada. I'll be taking us into the realm of experiential education, the what, the why, the how, and how this can help you create even more activation or engagement on multiple levels in your group. Certainly, not just like executive coaching, which is something Nicola and I were talking about earlier, but experiential approaches are at the heart of any great group process and any great coaching process. We'll then spend the midpoint of our conversation talking about what is core to helping groups and teams thrive, which is this notion of trust, safety, and connection. So I want to share with you a little bit about the research around what are the different ways we can connect people in a dialogue, in a conversation. As you'll gather as we go through, I'm not only a writer and a researcher, I am a practitioner. And so my hope is today that you'll get some really good ideas that you can implement and put into action right away. We'll wrap up our time together in that last 60 to 90 minutes, looking at the varied needs of groups and teams, coaching participants through the lens of the hybrid work styles. And I hope as pre-work, you got a chance to take part in this quiz, which I launched about a year ago. So if you haven't, that's okay. You'll have an opportunity. It just takes a couple of minutes to do that. I think we've got a housekeeping settled, so we're pretty much going to be moving piece to piece to piece. I'm glad to see some of you have read my work. So Rachel, your group coaching book was my guide when I started group coaching. Glad to hear that. Nicola is mentioning Jen's book are a welcome addition to my bookshelf. And, I really appreciated coming into people's worlds through my writing. And again, it's been infused by so much of the practice. So let's bring you in. These are actually part of a dice set. And I'm trying to see, I don't have here they are, the dice set right here. Maybe rather than using the icons on the screen, I'm going to roll some dice for us. These are the Reconnecting Workspaces dice. And just to get us started, I want to get your brains moving. So for some of you, it is 11 o'clock in the morning. Here in Toronto, it is 6 a.m. It's still a little dark outside my window. I'm going to roll some dice, and I just want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper and start sketching out whatever comes to mind. This is another way to sort of bring us into the space. Maybe it is an opportunity for you to think about how your work is flowing right now. So I'm going to put these up. Let's see how good the lighting is this morning. But as you can see, this is a little arrow, pointed arrow in a circle. I'll invite you to just draw that out. And for a moment, just think about what this represents for you. As you think about your work with clients, what does the arrow represent? Go with your gut. see what emerges. I've got two others that I'm going to put on the screen in a minute. So we first got the arrow. We've also got the hand or the finger with the reminder. And then we have the time zones. So three very different icons. We've got an arrow, we've got the time zones, and we've got the reminder. What does this represent for you in your work right now? All right. So part of group coaching is bringing everyone's voice into the room. We've got about 30 folks here today. I'm going to stop my share and let's go here. All right, let's see. What were some of the thoughts that came up? I know I was sort of smiling when I saw the time zones. Some of you might have been a bit thrown. It said on the announcement like 7 a.m. Eastern, but we may have people dropping in at about half an hour from now if they're calling in from New York. Always this arrow going forward to me represents the now what, right? The now what of conversation. And I was surprised, but not surprised to see the reminder. So I'd love to bring some voices in. What was a connection point for you this morning as you looked at one or more of these? Did anyone have a connection with these? You can put up your digital hand or your physical hand. Yeah, Nicola, you've got your physical hand up. What was the representation for you?
Oh, that time zones one was for me, to be honest, because we're just in EMCC, we're just organising the Global Provider Summit in November, and we're having so many conversations about all the different sessions which are going to be across the whole like follow the sun type calendar, and making sure that we've got everything covered, and being mindful about where people are and where people are going to be awake at different times as well. So I looked at that one, I thought, oh, that's speaking to me at the moment.
Nice. And again, that's the beauty of our work, right? Especially in a virtual space, we could be bringing people together from all over the world. How about you, Natalie? I see you've got your digital hand up. What did this represent for you today?
Yeah, hello, Jennifer and everybody. Actually, for me, the time zones are cultural diversity. And it is my area of my PhD was in that topic. And so the hand with the reminder was for me to just get on with my book and to think more about this increasingly important topic.
Yeah, it was important years ago, but it's even more important now that everyone has really mastered the technology. Anyone else before we move off? So here's one more request, and we've got Minkashi. Good morning. Hello. Good afternoon, probably to you.
No, good morning. I'm based in the US, so it's 6 a.m. for me as well. For me, the time zones piece really represents boundarylessness. I have intentionally set up a virtual practice, so I work with clients from around the world. And then to me, it also signifies empathy, because when you're trying to schedule something, you're thinking about others and you're thinking about whether it works for them or not. And then the arrow within the circle, because of the circle, to me, it represents direction within a context. And the reminder was a nudge. And that's what came up for me.
I'm going to just build on that notion of context, right? And if you were with me a few years ago, I did an exercise called What's Outside Your Window, right? Our contexts are all really different, yet we're coming together for these shared moments of experience. And that's really at the heart of group coaching. How do we find that connection point, that synthesis point, or even the bridge that brings us together for a short amount of time? So I'd love to invite you to start thinking about, how do you invite people in a room? We can do so many great things to get people present, but how do we also create this opportunity for people to see connectivity? So as we go through today, I hope you'll see some other options and opportunities as we go. Today's world of groups, I'm curious to hear, if you're doing groups right now, why don't you pop into chat some of the target areas or some of the focus areas that you're working around? Group coaching in 2022 can be very diverse, from supporting people with the reboarding process in an organization, to working with entrepreneurs, to working with parents, or working with new leaders. In essence, and I'll give a very quick definition, in essence, group coaching is when we're bringing people together for shared interest to have dialogue together. And again, we're coaching. We're using the same competency base. We are, however, making sure that we are activating people, connecting them, doing some of the elements that we're looking at today around engagement, belonging, and connection. So I'd love to hear from you. What types of groups are you currently working around, or maybe thinking of working around? Pop that in chat. If you're currently doing any groups, let us know what those are. Let us know if they're in person, virtual. It's quite amazing, just the diversity that we can look at. So we've got Natalie working with new leaders in sustainability, allowing them to peer coach and work on complex problems together. We've got Justine rebuilding team relationships after a difficult couple of years, changes in team and purpose. We've got Margaret, who's doing team development and coaching, helping teams to be more effective by reviewing how they work together and identifying how they improve that. And already we're starting to see the related sibling of team coaching. So I write and practice in both spaces. And the one thing that I want to make a nuance around is just in group coaching, we're really always playing a bit of a different role as the group coach, because typically we are the hub that may be bringing people together. So often groups don't know each other. They may be culturally diverse. They may come from different industries. So really helping groups come together, see the connectivity and the uniqueness is an inherent part of what the group coach does. That is sometimes and many times in contrast to the team coach that is really working with the team that is already established or is establishing and is coming together to create that alignment. So just note that in team coaching, we're focusing to the alignment. In group coaching, we're often really holding the real diversity that exists, because once we disconnect from our call during a week, we're off to our own worlds, to our different contexts. So some great examples. Again, I'm going back to our list here. We've got Alfonso, people in search of employment. Damien, helping organizations who are or are going through the M&A process to integrate virtual and in person. Rachel's indicated new ways of working, new leaders, women leaders, planning. Minkashi, my focus is mid-career technology professionals to help them be impactful people and change leaders, all virtual. Paul, helping heads teacher work more collaboratively. Susie, working with senior team leaders in an NGO, developing their relationship, being more collective in their working behaviors. Julia's working on culture change, enabling groups to move the organization's culture forward. Margaret, a lot of bringing bigger teams and groups together after the pandemic to refocus. So team days, reviewing strategy, renewing values, etc. And Kathy is here working with teams, 90% virtual. Good morning to Kathy. She's also part of our team. Mario, thinking of starting a leadership coaching group. And Margaret, Women Leadership Program, helping to build a strong network and developing skills together. So we've got some amazing experience in the room. And even if you haven't done group coaching, you're a coach, right? Bring what you know today. Some of this work is very much intuitive. And a lot of it is about bringing our folks together. So my hope is that you did take part in the pre-work. And a little bit of a backstory. So again, as a writer, I've really enjoyed sort of bringing to life different stories from effective group coaching over a decade ago through to my work pre-pandemic, which started taking us into the world of remote work, hybrid work, with a group of people known as the Digital Dozen. And the Digital Dozen are a group of 12 remote workers who really became the backdrop for a podcast that I host. It's called Remote Pathways. But more importantly, this book, a series of books. So starting with Effective Virtual Conversations, what can we do from a research-based practice of helping people have better conversations and connections in the virtual space. Throughout the pandemic, really followed along with so many other discourses. And today we really see teams continuing to struggle, whether they're figuring out what does hybrid mean or what does flex work mean, or really still remaining in the virtual and remote space. And so the hybrid work style was a quiz that I evolved a year ago. And it was my first quiz, and it's been fascinating to see the thousands of people who have taken this. We've taken the hybrid work styles quiz out with teams on team days we facilitate, and it's another framework to help teams understand who they are in their diversity and what unique strengths, talents, and abilities they bring to the table. So we're actually going to come back to the hybrid work style quiz later on in our session as we talk about connection and belonging, because regardless of what framework we use, whether it's an MBTI, whether it's a strengths finder, whether it's a DISC, or even something as baseline as the hybrid work styles, there are differences that really get magnified in this space, especially when we're working across dimensions like virtual and in person. So I'd love for you to share with us, if you have done the hybrid work style quiz, what is your style? Pop it in to the chat right now. If you haven't done it, this is going to be just a heads up. Take 2 minutes. You can do the quiz on your phone. I think Nicholas put in the chat the actual quiz link. You will get an automatic type. There's 5 different types that we'll talk a little bit about at the end of our call today. But I just want to get a sense of how many people were able to do it. So we've got visionaries, we got innovative experimenters, a couple of those. We've got a connector. All right. And we've got, more visionaries and connectors and IEXPs. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited. So we've got about 3 or 4 of the 5 represented already. The beauty of this is it's a nice sort of other way to think about just the diversity that exists within groups. And so you can see members of the Digital Dozen here on the screen. These aren't just cartoon characters, but some of them are also a newer set of coaches. And these coaches are going to be showing up in a quiz that is just releasing for coaches called the Group and Team Coaching Superpower. So more on that as we go. But first, let's dive into this first area, which is a bit around experiential approaches. I love to sort of share research. I'm not going to share so much today because this is a dialogue series, but just to set us up, I want to put on the table this notion of what is truly experiential. And, keeping in mind the start of my career, one of my first jobs was at the age of 17. I was working about 2 hours north of where I am right now in this moment. And I was taking people through one of our most beautiful provincial parks in Canada. It's called Algonquin Park. And if you've ever seen Canadian art, chances are you've seen some of the art of the Group of 7. It's very rugged, very landscape-based art, and became famous by a painter named Tom Thompson, who in 1917 was found drowned in his canoe in the middle of Algonquin Park. So that's over 100 years ago, but that, the ruggedness and sort of the vast wilderness that it represents, which is part of our Canadian identity, is where I learned and first started out as an experiential educator. And I was taking young leaders as well as corporate leaders through the park on these short and extended canoe trips. Part of the process was learning about who they were as a leader. And as you can imagine, a young 17-year-old, I was learning who I was, even as a person, as a human being. Well, I got to be mentored by a wonderful woman named Barb Whedon, and she really took me under her wing. Part of our journey with our leaders, whether they were youth or corporate employees who had come up from the city, was to really pinnacle this whole event with an overnight solo. And the solo involved having everyone pitch their own tent, find their own spot in the wilderness, and we drop people off at dark and we pick them up in the morning. And that was really a test of just how people were in that very experiential, very rugged moment. People found out so much about themselves through that very solo experience. And the experience wasn't just, sleeping alone in a tent. The experience was augmented by the dialogue and the discourse that happened the next day, taking people through what we commonly know as the foundations of experiential education, having discourse around what did people experience overnight? What did they notice? Did they hear the wolves out? Did they see or feel scratches on their tent? And if so, what did that lead to? So experiential processes are usually grounded in these three areas: the what, so what, now what. And it's not in an experiential way, it's not just about having an experience. We need to create that pause so that we can create and mine the learning in the phase of reflecting on what is important about this. What am I learning about myself? And that process isn't complete until we really look at the third stage of experiential processes, which is getting us to think about the now what. And as you can think about coaching, and as I said, experiential education is at the roots of the coaching process. So much of our coaching process also is that future forward orientation. Now, what are we going to do? Now, what can you do differently based on your experience here in the middle of this provincial park that you can take back to the downtown core and your work as a financial analyst? Kolb's process, again, David Kolb's work of ERGA, getting us to think about experience and reflection, generalization and application, is at the heart of so much of our work, whether we're coaching, whether we're facilitating, whether we're running action learning sets, etc. Each one of these, though, is a little bit different. And again, as a group coach, we're really leading always from our core coaching competencies, helping our group members articulate their goals, supporting them in that process of movement to whatever goals they have set, and helping to activate both action, awareness, and insight. So that's a bit of the frame that I want to use today. Now, there are so many different things that we can be doing when we bring groups of people together. And as you heard in the start of the call and read through the chat, so many different areas, from leaders to even teams. I would say there's a variety of different things that you could be bringing in. And I thought it would be interesting today to spark some dialogue very practically around what do you do in group coaching? So again, I would guess across our group today, we've got people doing a whole bunch of different things in group coaching. So I've got a list of more than 20 different approaches here. Just going to read through them, and we're actually going to move to our first breakout in a few minutes. Nicola is going to have these set up for us by the time I finish the list. And I think, Nicola, for this one, we're going to go for about 12, 15 minutes, because our first conversation is going to be around, like, if you're doing group coaching or even team coaching, what are the things you're doing? And here are a couple of the options. It's not an exhaustive list. There may be some others that you can help us add on, but these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in the span of a group coaching process, which might run for a month. It could run for a year. It could run for more than a year. The groups may be meeting weekly. They may be meeting bi-weekly. They may be meeting monthly. So we may include things like, and I'll go through the list very quickly, some I'll define, some I'll let you define, but laser coaching is often at the heart of a group coaching process. And while there are many definitions in laser coaching, the way we hold it at our Business Potentials Realized and train coaches around is that in laser coaching, there's a client of the week or a client for the moment, and they're getting coaching in a very sort of focused manner. It's not a full-blown 60-minute conversation. It may be a 10 to 15-minute time that they are being coached in the coaching chair in front of everyone else. We want to make sure that the rest of the group is actively listening, that they're listening into what the person has brought to the table, the questions the coach is asking, and the impact that those questions are having on the group. So laser coaching, very popular. That's often where you might read and have read in group coaching. Some people really liken it to related sibling of action learning sets. I would say, as someone who was trained in action learning sets in the early 1990s, yet didn't really start group coaching until the early 2000s, there is a nuance here. There is a difference. In our group coaching, again, we're really putting more emphasis on a lot of those things under the waterline. So we could be doing breakouts, as we're going to do today. We may have peer partners. We heard from some of you that that's where you work. Many of us go below the metaphorical waterline and look at values and peak experiences. We may also be taking people to a macro level and be doing a SWOT, or getting people to look at their PESTLE, right? The political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental layers. We may be doing work around the inner critic, or some of the work, as you would know now, in the world of the PQ, which has been really made famous by Shazard Chamain's work. Maybe we're doing work around the iceberg, whether we're doing cross-cultural or intercultural coaching, which has been a big part of my world of work. Or maybe it is looking at the iceberg, as you've seen in my work, which is really more below the waterline of getting into assumptions, into perspectives, into those values, mindsets, and other beliefs that are really not at the surface level immediately. We also have perspectives and benefits, getting people to storyboard or vision board, doing feed forward, as Marshall Goldsmith says. And Marshall Goldsmith's feed forward, if you've never heard of it, definitely look it up. He's got such a great open library, and feed forward is a wonderful innovation for those that are innovative experimenters. Definitely check this out, because it's an opportunity to create a culture of feedback, but feed forward, where we're stimulating new ideas by offering up very, unattached ideas to questions. Look it up. We may also be using Post-its, notes, that whether it's digital or physical, doing work around appreciations, working with visual prompts, working with goals, working with priorities, working with logos and icons, as we started today with the dice set, working with visual cards or our wheel of, and that could be wheel of life, business, teams, doing the spider web, which is an experiential process. So when I do the spider web with groups or teams, I bring in some rope, and we actually close off by creating our own web of appreciations at the end of a session. Group coaching might also involve, again, that focus outwards at our system and doing some stakeholder mapping. We may activate the fishbone to get to root cause issues around what our challenges or opportunities are. We, of course, will create ways of working and team agreements. If we are doing more team coaching, we might activate the best team exercise of getting people to think about, what do you look like at your best? What has been a peak experience in a team environment? What are those qualities, characteristics, and elements that make up a best team? And then we've got some more, again, strengths, vision, journaling prompts, geography, using our body, activating our body through somatic approaches or kinesthetic approaches to create some learning. And finally, modeling, actually getting people to build something or create something. So whether it's Lego or plasticine, or, balloons and straws to create towers. So the thing that I love about group coaching, and I think it's why I continue to do so much of it, even after, 3 decades of being a long-term group worker. And what I love about group coaching is that it's a sustained conversation. We're not just meeting once with a group, we're journeying with that group for a long time. So we're going to go to breakout, and I would love for you in this next 12 minutes to share what approaches would you like to be using more of, or what approaches would you just like to explore? Maybe you're new to group coaching, and out of this list, you're like, I didn't get that. I didn't really understand what it is. Or maybe there are some things that you're doing in addition to this list. We just want to have a quick conversation. 12 minutes, Nicola. How many people will be in our breakouts today?
Hi, Jen. I'll set groups of 4 people, so it should be a really nice conversation.
Groups of 4 people. So just to let you know, when we come back, I'd love for someone in each group to be willing to share a couple of ideas. It doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, but share with us when you come back 1 or 2 ideas, either approaches that you'd like to incorporate more or approaches that you're planning on incorporating more. So it is just about 1/2 12 minutes. We'll see you back here.
Fantastic. You'll go for 10, then you'll get a countdown for the remaining 2. I'll see you in 12.
All right. Thanks, Nicola. Welcome back. And would love to get a couple of insights from groups. My hope is that there were some additional ideas that emerged. So as I indicated before we left, we'd love for each group to share a couple of ideas, things that you're curious about exploring further or interested in activating. Nicola, do you want to share what you and I talked about? There was, I think, a really key nugget that you enjoyed. So what is your take forward so far?
No, I really love the what, so what, now what flow of questioning, and I can see that's something I could apply straight away. And the checklist as well. I'm looking at lots of things there, and I've had a recent experience where it would have been better to have managed expectations at the beginning and done more bonding at the beginning and just sort of organise roles at the beginning. And those are the 2 things I take away, actually.
Excellent. And thank you for sharing those. So again, some of you may be coming at this from group perspective, some from a team perspective. I would say a lot of these different approaches are things we can use in both areas. I'll do one more shout out. Is there another group, another insight that someone would like to share verbally? And if so, feel free to put your hand up. We'll go to Margaret, and at the interim, if any of the groups would like to share in chat what you focused on, do let us know, because this is really, I think, the heart of sessions like this. So Margaret, where did you go for discussion?
We ended up finding something that all 5 of us had in common, and that was the importance of any introductory activity that we might introduce and taking it slow at the start, allowing people plenty of time to build, trust, share things about themselves. We all had different ways of doing that, whether it was pictures or artifacts or just creating some questions to get everybody talking early on and giving them time to connect in the room. And we all agreed that if we do that well and take time over it, although it may feel slow, the rest of the session can go faster because the trust is already building. So that was where we all found we had that view in common. Start slow in order to get further.
I love that. And again, with groups who don't know each other, that time is essential. A lot of coaches, I think one of the biggest pitfalls for coaches new to group coaching is they feel they have to get somewhere with the group. Well, in fact, in the first conversation, we just want to allow that time, as Margaret said, for the group to connect, to find the connection. And that can take some time to also see what's uniquely different, because we know that groups that excel are diverse. And so how do we really find that midpoint? And sometimes it's not even a midpoint, but it's some sort of balance of how are we similar, but how are we different? And really taking time to establish, expectations, even roles. And that's not a process that we can really rush. So let's go to chat. We've got some ideas coming in. So we've got, let's see. This brings up one of the principles of training from the back of the room. Connect learners with each other first and before connecting them with the content. Absolutely. We've got to have that connection with each other. And that's at the heart of the work that we do as coaches. So any other insights that people would like to share? Anything else, any of these exercises? Paul, I can see your hand up. Let's go over to you. Good morning to you.
Yeah, we were group 8. There was 4 of us in the group, and it was really interesting when we would look at the discussion came around, or one of the colleagues was sharing around dominant voices within a group, and actually, and particularly in the virtual world, which was very interesting. And they had a really interesting thing which linked actually really nicely to that experiential element that you did, in that the colleague asked the people at the beginning of a session to go back to the previous session and to envision where they were, how they were feeling prior to that session, how they felt during the session, and how they felt after the session, and how they were heard. And actually, it was very interesting to get all the different lenses sharing back their perception And we actually challenged ourselves a little bit as a group in terms of saying, even as the group lead, the facilitator, whatever language you want to use, the coach, how do we know what's going on within our sessions to know that we're getting in the right direction? But we don't think we got an answer to that one, but it was a question that sort of got generated. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and Group 8. And I think, again, that's a really important inquiry to always be holding. What is the pulse of the group? What really is happening? We can have our own assessment of it, but is it really accurate, especially in this virtual space? So, a coach's role, I want to make this really explicit, because I think as we do more and more group and team coaching, the role of the coach really is shifting quite significantly from how we were maybe in a one-on-one coaching relationship, right? When we're coaching groups, we're one of many voices. And so how are we really putting a strong focus on process, not on agenda, but on process, so that we really help the group also initially get into the rhythm, their own rhythm, and establishing that as well. So with that, any other comments before we go to a second piece, which is linked to this trust? Any other comments? We've got some more ideas here just coming up in chat. Damien also said the antithesis is true of the connect learners with each other and connecting them with the content. Well-established groups, Damien continues, need time to challenge and groupthink constructively. Sorry, they need time to challenge groupthink constructively. Yes, absolutely. How are we noticing the ruts that we're getting into? What are the rhythms? How are they helping? How are they hindering? How are they activating? And how are they quieting other group members as well? So with that, let's go into our second part. And that part, of course, is about the connection. And we heard just a few minutes ago, I think it was Margaret, this notion of trust. And at the heart of any group coaching, team coaching, and one-on-one, of course, is this, what I call the triad or the triangle of trust, safety, and connection. And if you were here with me in former years of the GPS, whether it was through effective virtual conversations or last year in a hybrid, I seem to always bring this back every time because it's so important, right? And in my writing, my research, I really see that it is a triangle. If we're missing one of these layers, the group will really get impacted, or in other words, the team as well. So be thinking about what you're doing to build that trust. Are you taking the time to help people understand who's in the room and what's important and what's different? Our little windows, as I say, don't show a lot, especially if we're virtual. So what's outside the window? What's important for other members to understand about me in this context? We also want to make sure that we are ensuring safety. And that is something that takes time. This is also something that some coaches are not picking up on all the nuance. And of course, it's created by everything from the languaging we use, to the process, to the involvement of group members. So what are you noticing about who's always starting off the conversation? What are you noticing about their age, their race, their gender, etc.? It's the small things in groups that can really also have a tremendous ripple effect. And the third part of this triangle is, of course, connection. So we've just heard a little bit in chat around that. I want to share with you another quick framework that I've been using in my work, in training, but also in getting people to think about these various layers. Here in the virtual space, anytime you're running a call, whether it's with one person, with a group, with a team, how are you helping people connect with the topic, right? I think most of us naturally go there. We're here today to talk about difficult conversations. What's important about this topic for you? We also want to connect ourselves in. How are we showing up? What is our presence? And what is the environment we want to create? Have you thought about that before you step into a virtual call? Have you also thought about how you're connecting others together, right? The power of the group is the power of the group. It's not the power of the coach. And so how are we stepping back to allow the group to gel? I often smile, and I share this with the groups that I work with, because many times the groups that seem to come together and gel the most are groups that for some reason have had me fade out in day one. Maybe there's like a FedEx delivery that's come to my front door and I've had to step away from the call. Maybe my internet's gone down. Maybe something has taken me away for a moment in that first time we're together. But I always point to this because it's very interesting that, when I fade out strategically and allow the group to lean in together, there's a different energy that gets created. So yes, our role is important. And what would happen if you lean back a little bit so that the group can lean forward with themselves? I'm just going to leave that for you to think about and maybe experiment with, because certainly if the coach is too present, we may be distracting from some of that magic that happens peer-to-peer. A couple of other ways we want to think about connection in our work is, of course, a connection to any content, if there is content. Again, the major shift, and I just want to, this is again framed as virtual conversations. In a coaching conversation, we're not really bringing content. If we are, we're then coming into the training realm, not necessarily the coaching realm. But there may be a piece or two that is important for us to discuss. I'm thinking again in the realm of, say, teams that are struggling because they don't have shared mental models around difficult conversations. They don't have a shared approach to conflict or naming issues. Another layer that you'll want to think about is how do we connect people on the platform we're using? And again, today, great case in point, we've got Zoom, we've got all the bells and whistles, we have used chat. We haven't used annotation, which is one that I would normally use. Don't forget that you've got annotation in the space. But today we're leaning more heavily into chat and also into breakouts. And then the final piece we want to make sure is present in every virtual conversation, of course, is that context piece. How and what is happening outside your window? How are you bringing in your space individually into the group conversation? And that can be very, very different from group member to group member. So I'd love for you, again, just a quick interaction point here. My guess is there's probably one of these layers which you're not necessarily activating intentionally. If you were to do something different with your groups, which area would you like to be more intentional with in your work? Just pop that in chat for us. Maybe you want to use more of the different elements of the platform. Maybe you want to bring in more around the topic. Maybe it's the openers. What is something that you want to be doing more of? Just take a moment, pop that in chat, and that's going to segue us into our next piece. So yeah, what might you be doing differently? I'll take us back to this. What might you do differently? And I'll just note we've got a couple of other pieces here. Margaret's also talking about the trust or psychological safety to have constructive challenge. Yeah. So Andrea's going to bring in more on the context. Good. Anyone else? Justine likes a reminder to not be too present, to let the peer-to-peer happen. Yeah. Groups need oxygen, right? Groups need oxygen, and that may be pause, that may be time. For George, he's going to look at the you and the others layers. Kashi was going to look at the context and others. Good. So really think about it. And this is where, it's such a dynamic space. With our work, we may be co-coaching. That's a whole other layer of this environment as well. So with that, let's get into this final piece, which is a little bit about belonging, but is also about thinking about how do you support the unique needs of different group members. And again, to bring this to life, to make this a little bit more real, I, of course, am activating the members of the Digital Dozen. So in the Digital Dozen, we have Ned, who is the red connector. Some of you mentioned that you are connectors according to the hybrid work style quiz. Ned is the newest kid on the block. He is the new team member. And we know what new team members need, right? They really are often yearning for understanding what's happening within the system. They need direction on how to do things. But what's quite unique about Ned is that he really is that connector type of person. Sees naturally how the puzzle pieces fit together. In a team meeting, Ned may be the one who's saying, you know what, I'm hearing that, ... Or he might be the one, the connector, she might be the one who is saying, you know what, I think we need to connect in with this resource on another team. In a group, not everyone's thinking that way. In fact, some may be thinking more like Mo, who is our visionary. And Mo is the sort of the entrepreneurial person on the team. She was a solopreneur in her former life, has come to the team. She's known as that intrapreneur, and she's the visionary. Mo is so great in this team because she can really help the team look forward and set that vision. If you were with me a couple of years ago at the EMCC presentation, I talked a little bit about how important vision has been in times of disruption, right? Vision is something that sets our horizon line. So when change happens, instead of getting the whiplash of looking at it like too closely, it allows us for that longer term vision. And we need people like Mo, the visionary, in teams today to help us continue to go back to, why are we doing this? What's important? Now, Mo is listening in different ways than Ned is, the connector. And if we put in the mix now, we've also got people who are culture wizards, people like Mel. Mel is the coach of the team, and Mel is all about helping the team articulate, how do we do things here? Again, as we think about culture and creating culture, it may be a different focus. To round out this group or team, you can hold it either way, we also have our innovative experimenter. And she, of course, is thinking about fusion. How do we mix things together to create something new? And then in the green, we've got Joe, and Joe is actually the team lead. Joe is a builder. Joe likes to get things done. So Joe will naturally bring to the meeting some of that urgency. Now, that can be positive, but it also can be a negative. So with each one of our strengths, of course, there is the flip side. There is the shadow side or the blind spot that our superpowers often activate. So I'm not going to go through these much, because what I think we're going to do instead is we're going to go to the room. And if you have had a chance to do the quiz, you might have also received the report. So there's a little report that goes with each one of these that goes deeper into like, what do people need? So just here's Joe. Her needs as a builder, it's not always about getting things done, which is her mantra, but she really can benefit from renewal, taking a pause and slowing things down, as we heard, so that she's able to grow. She could really benefit from leadership coaching and also developing coaching skills. So there's going to be probably members of each one of the different styles. People like Mo, of course, the creative, who's always asking what's possible. Mo is great at thinking bigger, creating a pause to support connection. And she might also benefit, though, in getting herself out of the way, because she can be very hard on herself, right? As a visionary, she's always looking ahead, but then she may be getting pulled off course due to current realities and how that might get in the way. We've also got, of course, Sam, who is the innovative experimenter, fusing ideas together. She needs that space to dream. She loves to try things out. She needs the permission and the authority to be able to do that. She can benefit from the 6 Thinking Hats coaching tool. I don't know if any of you are familiar with De Bono's work, but De Bono's got this great metaphorical process. It's a facilitated process to get us thinking about issues around 6 different colors of hats. Are we looking at it from the cynic's view of the black hat? Or are we looking at it from the optimist view of the yellow hat? So maybe you're an innovative experimenter or explorer, and you probably bring some interesting tools that are a little bit different than our culture wizard. Again, I mentioned Mel, the coach, who is really great at helping a team understand who we are. I like to use that notion of the wizard because there's typically someone in a team or a group who is really pulling in different elements and fusing them again together to help the team excel in results and relationships. And finally, I started with Ned, who is the connector. We have a number of you who are connectors. their mantra is, here's the connection, or how does this fit with that? And they have really high need with connecting in with others. They're the ones on a team that might put up their hand and say, hey, can we slow down for a minute? Are we able to like really spend a moment to see how X connects with Y or Z or Z? So I think, as you think about your work, I'd love to just give you an opportunity to have some dialogue. We're going to go into breakouts for another round. And for this one, Nicola, I'm just looking at time. I think we can fit in another 12 minutes. Yeah, we can fit in 12 minutes. Do you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I'll do like I did last time as well. I'll do it for 10 and the extra 2.
10 and 2.
You'll come back, it'll be 12.
So here are the instructions. We'd love for you to share in your group, if you feel comfortable, what type showed up for you. And maybe the type didn't resonate. But again, I want you to have some discussion on how do we support different needs in a team, right? Because in a team or a group, our strength is going to be the diversity. Yet if I'm coming in and I'm a connector and I'm working with a builder who wants to get things done, what do I need to dial up and what do I need to dial back? So in this time, we'd like to have, just spark a conversation. Like, is there a style you uniquely bring? If so, what's the benefit? What's that positive enabler that you bring to the environment? But also what might get in the way? What might need to be dialed back as much as dialed up? So with that, we're going back to our same groups. Any questions before we leave? My guess is you'll find some good discussion regardless of if you land on that question or not. I just hope you'll have an interesting time together once again. So with that, Nicola, let's head on out. 12 minutes.
Just do one little jiggery pokery here. There we go.
Yeah, and even, you know what, maybe here's what I'll do just while we're waiting, because people can see this in the slides. Again, the reasoning behind doing the hybrid work styles was to really create a framework for people to be able to be more comfortable thinking about some of the unique distinctions that show up in a group or a team. One of the experiences of these last few years is, people really their hunger for feeling connected and having that sense of belonging has really, I think, probably increased more than ever. And so I wanted to leave us today with just sort of 5 questions that you might put in the space for a group to be talking about around belonging. We've touched on some of these as we've gone today, but just it's more of a synthesis. Things like, have we asked the group, what is our shared interest or common purpose? Have we asked the group, what do you notice about common connections? Or have we asked people to reflect on, how do I connect with you? We might also be asking a related question of, how can I contribute to you? Or what can I do to support you? Or flip side, what can you do to support my needs, right? Notice the reciprocity in this, and that's such a key piece of influence. When we're in a peer-to-peer relationship, we're activating that one of the principles of reciprocity. If I do something good for you, you are more likely to do something good for me. So in coaching, are we sparking questions to get people to think about how are they leaning in to support peers, and what do they need from their peers in order to show up as their best self, or as they're able to show up and really feel that trust, safety, and connection so that they can further input to the group. And we also want to ask along the way, like, what's our shared commitment? How are we committed to each other? How do we have each other's backs? So some of these conversations may be more direct. Some of them may be more indirect. Some of this has a cultural layer as well, right? As a Canadian, here in Canada, we are less, we're very an indirect communicator compared to our neighbors in the South and the US. And so I might surface some of these questions in a second or third call for Canadian groups versus a first or second call for American groups. So I do want to, again, place on the fact that with our virtual space, chances are you're bringing people together from all across the world. And how are you helping people really find their own anchor while also, leaning in in support of others. So we're curious. I think by now everyone is probably back. I would love to hear a couple of the insights you had in that last phase of, what was important as you thought about how do you become more effective in supporting others in groups. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. So our ability to dial up and our ability to dial back is really critical, as is our coaching toolkit to having approaches that are going to match the needs of different and diverse group members. So let's see, what would any groups like to just share a little bit about their conversation? Any quick summaries just to get a pulse of where you went in that 12 minutes?
I'm happy just to share a particular aspect of our group discussion, which was very important, is the freedom for the group to flow and to see where that goes and being able to carry that as the coach. But then we actually focused in the end, which was very nice and would have been interesting to discuss, the sensitivity to neurodiversity because it's less obvious. And also the sensitivity to different ages and generations. So a younger generation that is far more afraid of things like role play, open debate, brainstorming. They like to do things more anonymously. Levels of anxiety are far higher. And so that awareness of that kind of diversity as well.
So many layers, right? And are we thinking through the diverse needs that are showing up in the room? This is where, and I'm glad that you brought up neurodiversity, Natalie, in group, right? Like very much. Different group members are going to need different things at different times. Some are going to be willing to jump in and have a conversation. Others, that might be very confronting and may shut them down. So are we giving people some pause time, similar to what I did at the beginning where, there was 30 seconds of silence for people to gather their thoughts. Some groups might need 2 minutes to gather their thoughts before they're comfortable speaking. I think a lot of group coaches are maybe taken aback or even surprised that people don't put up their hand like right away, right? New groups need time to form and get to know each other before that active engagement starts. And space and time, a pause, is really critical many times in activating that. So thank you, Natalie. Mario, let's go to you. Anything you'd like to share?
Well, it's not actually something that we discussed during our group, but building on what Natalie was mentioning in terms of neurodiversity, and that's the emotions that the people bring to the session at that point in time, and therefore sometimes having an emotional check-in, so to speak, understanding what kind of emotions people have brought with them to the session can help to orientate the direction of that discussion.
Yeah. So some of you, back to a theme that one of the groups mentioned, how do you bring people into the room? Are you doing a temperature check? Are you inviting people to check in with a one word around the energy they're bringing to the call? Right? That's one of my favorites because you get a very quick sort of scattershot of like, how are people coming? And if the group trusts each other, they will be very honest in saying, you know what? I'm bringing like the toilet flush energy today, right? It's not always a positive energy, but that can help to really understand where the group is. So I think we had one more hand up. Minkashi, over to you.
Yeah, and actually, Mario just covered it. So one of the check-in questions that I've used, and I read this somewhere and I've used it successfully, is what was the last thing you were doing before coming to this session? And what I've noticed is that using that in meetings at work as well is helpful. So everybody then understands where folks are coming from, and it helps generate empathy amongst themselves. So people are less jumpy, especially if you have tough meetings or if you know you're going to have a tough conversation. I found that very helpful.
Yeah. we don't have the same travel time in the virtual world. So how do we create that on-ramp to the discourse, to the dialogue? And Rachel, you're going to get one of our last comments or questions. Over to you.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that came up as we were discussing and we were looking at the model, and all of us are like very new to the model, but we did realize that so there are two things that came up from our conversation. One was that just recognizing that the team needs different styles to be successful. And what if all of us are very similar, and let's say all of us are visionary, or all of us are innovators, or or all of us are connectors? Just recognizing that maybe we need a different style of thinking is useful, and it avoids the whole groupthink mentality. So that was one. Also, this thing of one is, what do I need from the group to be able to participate, but also thinking, what does the group need from me?
Mm-hmm.
So looking at it both ways. What do I need to bring, and what do I need from the group? Yeah.
It's that reciprocity, right? It's like, I am contributing, but I also have needs from the group. And again, Damien's mentioned fantastic, Rachel, we need to continually remind ourselves of this. So I hope that this morning has really sparked you with some thinking, maybe a little bit more around the frameworks. If you're interested in learning more about the hybrid work styles, we do a 5-week program on that. And as I was just sharing with Nicola, and actually you're the first official group to hear this. So we have our clients that are showing up with different styles, but what about ourselves? What about our own unique superpowers? So my quiz this year is the Team and Group Coaching Superpowers quiz. It's different, and we bring different skills and strengths as a coach. So I'm going to invite you, if you're interested, to be one of the first sort of couple hundred people in taking the new Group and Team Coaching Superpower Quiz. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about this. I'll be back in the GPS Summit to talk about co-coaching, where I really hope that this is going to be a useful tool for co-coaches to understand what they're uniquely bringing as coaches. So unlike the hybrid work style quiz, which really evolved out of the work I've done with teams, the Team and Group Coaching Superpower Quiz is a work for coaches, helping you think about your unique style. Are you a coach that loves, like me, you've probably seen me, I'm like the creative tool master. I love to bring my dice and my Post-it notes. That's different than some of the coaches I partner with who are more of the grounded labyrinth, mindfulness coaches who create a beautiful pause through the pause, etc. So I've enjoyed our time. I'm going to be here for the next while with our networking, which I know we're going to, but I'm just curious, in our last minute, are there any questions that maybe we just want to put out on the board for discussion in that networking phase? Any questions at all? Just going to put us back to this. No questions, big or small? All right. Well, again, I think group coaching is something that many of you are doing. We hope that this has given you an opportunity to really think about something different or something new, something reinforced that you can be doing more of intentionally. I've enjoyed our time together. And as always, Nicola, thank you for having me, and thank you for holding the space for a great discussion that we can put into practice. So don't forget, and maybe this is our final question in chat, what was the one thing you are carrying forward? We heard from some people it was the what, so what, now what, but what's one thing you can actually put into action this week or next as a coach? Just pop that into chat. We'd love to see what the real tangible takeaways were for you.
Thank you, Jen. And just while everybody's just tapping in their tangible takeaways, I just wanted to add my thanks, add the thanks of everybody, and thanks of EMCC Global as well for you leading this wonderful, wonderful discussion. As I was sharing with you in the breakouts as well, every time you come and lead one of these groups, there's just so many synapses that are flying in my head at the moment, and popping all over the place. And so I thank you very much for leading this wonderful, wonderful discussion.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And I hope that the synapses are firing away. I did an undergrad at McGill in psychology and cognitive psychology about 3 decades ago. And what wires together fires together. So let's wire on and let's like create some new learning for ourselves. So it's great to see all of your insights, and again, hope that this has led a bit of a paper trail for you to find something new to just add on, keep adding on to your coaching toolkit. All right, Nicola, officially now to networking.
Officially now to networking. And after the networking, I'm going to say I'm going to be going on to the quiz and finding out what my superpower is, because I need to know.